I come from the arts and cultural world, so I used to make films that were very pop culture, and they were actually very popular. But then, with time I realized, shouldn't we use this art and culture for something beyond arts and culture? And that's when I decided to be more activist and make films for social justice, but use the creative resistance as the theme for my future films. I set up an organization called Cultures of Resistance Network, and I've been making films that show how creativity can push people, because when you talk about politics, people just like get turned off, but through a song or a beautiful photo or an amazing film, you can really touch people's hearts. I think it's a very effective way to produce social justice. My topics are always very personal. It's like all of a sudden you have personal experiences that really just push me. Like the Western Sahara, I didn't know anything about Western Sahara, so I went to the film festival to show my film on Syrian refugees. And I was the recipient of so much hospitality and generosity from these people who don't even have a home, don't even have a state, because they live under occupation, and they are now in refugee camps in Algeria. That's where the festival was taking place. And I was just so humble with the experience and so honored and just so overwhelmed that people with so little can be so kind to, Europeans, Americans, and people from wealthy countries. And then I just felt I had the obligation to do a little something, to show my gratitude. So I made a film for them. Yeah, and it's called Life is Waiting, Resistance and Referenda in Western Sahara. The Syrian film I also made because I felt like, these refugees, the title of the film is When Elephants Fight, the Grass Suffers. And I feel all these refugees and, displaced people during wars, that's what they are. They're the grass, You have all these big powers fighting the elephants, and the ones who really end up dead are the innocent. And they become refugees and displaced internally and also outside. So I also decided to make a film for them. Well, when you go from pop culture to political, first of all, the world shuts the door. I used to be the darling of the press and the film festivals, and then when I started, making films about things that matter and becoming more serious, we were like, oh. But it's a full circle, because I became very much aggressive and I wanted to really work on human rights. But now I realize that it's true. Arts and culture is the way for you to promote, human rights, women's rights, children's rights, ecology, and protect the environment. So now I'm very much about the arts and culture, and in more subtle ways. And I think this new film that we are making here in Bulgaria is going to show, the power of arts and culture. I'm a very adventurous kind of person, so I'm moved by my gut feeling, And to me, at this moment, to make films is about collaborating with creative people, and it can happen, anywhere in the world, And I feel that this is what is interesting, this kind of collaborative effort, And this film I'm making was shot in Burkina Faso in West Africa. My cameraman was Spanish, my editor is Bulgarian, and the person who's gonna do all the music score, he's Iranian. And I'm from Brazil with Korean descent. So it's like a very alive way of showing that it's about global solidarity, And it's about participatory filmmaking too. I have lots of volunteers doing translations and helping us, scout for footage. And all of a sudden, it's not a film by me, it's a film by hundreds of people, because we're all working together. Yeah, people ask, to be an activist filmmaker, isn't that dangerous? It's definitely dangerous, because a lot of times people think it's an adventure, but there is something that is real. War is a real thing, and state terrorism is real. So sometimes I get into sketchy situations, like we were going to make a film about the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, all these boats going to Gaza to deliver, humanitarian aid. And the Israeli commandos, they sent, commandos, to attack all the boats, and they killed 9 people on my boat. And that was really like shocking, because we knew that maybe we would go to jail, or they would use tear gas, or, but we never expected them to come in the middle of international waters in the middle of the night and start shooting people. And my cameraman from Serbia at that time, he used to say, "Oh, Iara, you're so, bombastic with this fear that something can happen. There's no way they can take over a boat with hundreds of people." And I was like, "You don't understand. These people are like, merciless." And he got to witness himself that this was not an adventure, this was war, And so I, in a way, I fear for the camera crew, and all the people working with me, because if people shoot me, I know I'm getting, I'm taking this confrontation responsibly, and I'm very aware. But a lot of young people, sometimes they go to very war-torn countries and conflict zone with me, thinking that it's going to be an adventure, but a lot of times they realize this is not an adventure, this is real state terrorism, And but I think it's important for people to have the courage to go and see what's happening on the ground, because what we see through media a lot of times is completely not real, So you only get to see things when you're on the ground. Well, when we were on this boat, I knew that the Israeli army, if they came, they would confiscate all the cameras and media cards and tapes and everything. So I had told my Serbian cameraman, use the small SD card, not the big HD card. And I thought he was going to forget, because things were so crazy, but he actually did. And since because he was blue eyes and white and European, the Israeli commanders were the government, after they took us all to jail, they were more concerned about the Muslims and the people with the beer and the Turkish people. So my Serbian cameraman, he hid the SD cards behind the elastic of the underwear. And we were the only people that managed to get footage out of the Israeli raid and attack. And we screened it at United Nations, and it was an uproar internationally, because when the government of Israel kills Palestinians, nobody cares. But this is the importance of global solidarity, because we had Swedish and British and Americans and English, and all these international people got to witness the brutality of a state terrorist government. That's why it became international news. And that's why it's so important to get people from all walks of lives and, and all nationalities to work together, because the people in Western Sahara, they're not going to be able to do by themselves. The people in Palestine, the people in Kashmir, the people in West Papua, everybody needs support, international support, to advance human rights. Rejection is part of life, and it's about finding your niche. Not everybody's going to want to see a film about snowboarding, or about music, or about politics, or about Western Sahara or Burkina Faso. But you have to create your success, because it doesn't come from heaven. It's about hard work. And if you work quietly behind the scenes and you work hard, the work will make noise. And it's about you, like the cliche says, if the luck doesn't knock at your door, build a door. So you have to create opportunities for things to go through this world that is overwhelmed with information and media and films and books and everything. Because there will always be some people out there, there will always be people there that care, and you have to just connect to them. Nowadays, we have social media, we are trying to show our films in off the beaten path countries, for example, and people working with me are like, how are we going to show this film in Eritrea or Guinea-Bissau or Angola or Zimbabwe, or, and like, let's make friends. Let's make friends in those countries, and then they can recommend like art venues or cultural venues, or, maybe a basement, and we'll show our films in different corners of the world. And this is also something that I really think is important, to acknowledge that there is beyond Paris, London, New York, Tokyo, I think filmmakers, they work so hard, and it's so hard to distribute their films, that once they show in the big capitals of the Western world, they think that's it. But for me as a filmmaker, I like to show my film in places that people don't even think, that there is an audience, because we're all part of the world, We should not discard some of the countries that you know, like, oh, who cares about showing the film in Vanuatu? I care. Yeah, everything counts. I mean, obviously, it's wonderful if you have a screening of a documentary and 1,000 people show up. But then, you know, if you're in a classroom with like 50 students, it's as valuable as, you know. And I think everything counts because sometimes you touch the heart of one person and this person will do more and the ripple effect will continue. Yes, that's the other thing. When I was making films about pop culture, there was no censorship. But once you start dealing with world affairs, the world changes. And that's why I realized that the most important thing when you're a filmmaker making films about touch issues, political issues, is your independence, you know? Because if you are even connected to a good broadcast company or good producers, there will always be censorship. So nowadays, I make home movies, but I have full control. You know, I get my friends, we're all low budget, and we cut, and we film, and we edit, and even to screen it, you know, we're not waiting around for distributors. We find grassroots ways of showing film in the basement or in a classroom. Sometimes big festivals, they show our films too, but we are not counting on big venues, you know, and just kind of like getting people to support and show the film in very underground way and get the message out. Because even the press, you know, like the press also, sometimes you have journalists that have good intention of getting, you know, this important information out there, but then when it gets to the editor, they will just cut it and they'll be like, no, we're not broadcasting, you're not going to broadcast this interview, you know. And that happens with the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. Since we were the only people that managed to get footage out, I thought, wow, the whole world is going to want that, you know? But the media people, they were like, oh, we ran the story already. I'm like, yeah, but you ran the story from the government of Israel point of view. But people don't like to confront the big powers, you know? And just is just how the world operates. So, and if you want to be like real, you're going to have to find independent ways to get the information out there and make your films and distribute your films and everything. So my advice to young filmmakers is that make it simple, make it from the heart, make it real, and make it very independently. Yeah. History is indeed written by winners, and if you want to know the real history, you gotta go and really dig out and get on the ground and see with your own eyes and experience with your own body. And this is what I do, you know, instead of even like making films about things that I'm an expert on, I actually learn through the journey of the filmmaking. And then I'm able to like get a very genuine, you know, assessment of what's going on because I'm talking directly with people. And I also like the idea of making films where the people who are the subject of the films, they express themselves. You know, a lot of times I think Western films are made from the, you know, experts' point of view, all these political analysts from big institutions. They talk about Africa, they talk about the Middle East. Me, I like to go to the Middle East and know what the Middle Eastern people think about what's going on there. Go to Africa and you know, listen to them, what they think about their history and their continent. And this is a very interesting perspective too that we don't have a lot of access to. But you gotta be very courageous, you know, and go to all those countries that the State Department says don't go. You know, a lot of the countries I visit is always in the red list, like countries you should avoid. But that's where you have to go to see what's really happening on the ground. Filmmaking is a tough thing because people think it's glamorous because the forefront is like, wow, you make a film, but there is a lot of tedious work behind the scenes. And I think this is also very important for aspiring filmmakers because it's not about fun. It's about very tedious, meticulous, you know, like when you're editing, you're like doing surgery on dialogue, you're doing surgery on, you know, sound reduction, noise reduction, you're like, you know, dealing with music and how to cut these and reading interviews and selecting, and there are a lot of tedious work. But then you think about it, these great scientists, when they discover some medicine to cure this and that, they spent their lifetimes in the lab, looking through the microscope. And this is just what life is, It's always 99% sweat and just 1% creativity. And everybody has to be aware of that if they want to enter this filmmaking world. Yeah, the good thing is when the film is ready, you are going to use that as a megaphone, because if you are just speaking one-to-one, there is only so much you can accomplish. But when you have a film, it's a very amazing tool of engagement. And the film can just travel the world. Like nowadays, we have the technology to send the film digitally. Like in the 80s, we used to send 35 millimeter prints. It was very cumbersome, But now you just zap it, you just Dropbox a high resolution film to all corners of the world, and simultaneously you can be speaking like through this megaphone, which is a film. So I think, despite the hardship of making them, I think this is still a very productive tool of engagement. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm always in the boys' club, but I think it's just part of the process. But I tend to also acknowledge women in my films, the one we are making now in Burkina Faso. When you look at the people's movement, there were a lot of men on the street, and you may even think that this popular movement was more about the men. But as we point out in the film, the women, they are activists behind the scenes. If they were not doing all that work behind the scenes, the guys would not be on the street demonstrating, So we also have to acknowledge this kind of like activism and involvement from the women's point of view that is not so like exposed and obvious, but the women are always behind the scenes, The man with a dream needs a woman with vision. A lot of times when I'm trying to push people, hey, get more active, people say, I don't have extra money. I'm sorry, I cannot have. I'm like, it's not about just donating money, If you cannot build a school, maybe you can help build a classroom, or maybe you can be a teacher and use your month or 2-week vacation and go do some work as a volunteer. And, if you are a musician, you can write a song for the cause you care and you embrace. If you are a graphic designer, you can make some posters and flyers. Everybody can do, You can donate your time. Like go on the weekend and take care of senior people or orphans, or just give your love. And that will be so valuable. So I think people should not just create excuses that they don't have surplus money, surplus time, surplus whatever. Everybody has a little something to give, And I also think it's very important for young people to go beyond the Facebook activism, by clicking like button. That's not enough. You got to get out there, And I always tell people, travel. Travel is a good way, because then you get to eat with people and be with them, and then you can really learn and exchange and true experience, because I think what's happening now is also everything is mediated by our computer screen, and I think it's important that young people get more on the road and see things firsthand, Just never give up, because everything in your way is gonna make you feel like, oh, I'm not succeeding. But first of all, you have to allow time. When people are trying something, it's not going to happen overnight. It's always a cumulative effect of effort. And sometimes maybe you feel that you're accomplishing and you're more successful 10 years from now. But this is the way, you can, time is something that you cannot control. You need to go through. So it's about dedication. It's about being honest and from the heart, and then I think people will feel it, Even if you make a simple film, if it's honest, people will feel it. So keep it simple and real, and perseverance.
Thank you very much.
Well, at least it's very realistic. It is not like, go to the best film school to make great films. It's about telling people like, hey, anyone can make a film, you
And
know?
it's very important what you said about it takes time.
Yeah, people are like, oh, I'm a failure because I've been doing this for 5 years, but
Yeah.
it takes time.